Good morning. I'm Kelly Johnson, and I'm going to be asking Bob Ervin some questions as part of the bar's 50th year celebration. Mr. Ervin was president of the Florida Bar from 1965 to 1966. Bob, we appreciate you being with us.
It's a pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about your professional career.
Well,
Starting with college. Well,
I finished Leon High School here and entered the University of Florida in 1935. Ultimately received my bachelor's degree, Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, and entered law school. I was out some breaks there, earning funds to continue my education because we didn't have the plethora of loans and grants and such at that time as we have now. I was in law school in 1941 when the United States started the real mobilization for World War II. I finished my freshman year of law school, went to the Marine Corps in June of 1941, served through the Second World War, returned to college in late 1945 after the war was over, completed my education, graduated in 1947. Since then, I've been engaged in the private practice of law in Tallahassee continuously till now.
You've been with the same firm?
Well, I started off by myself, and it ultimately became a firm when a few people were willing to come with me, and we practiced law together. It's been a real pleasure. I have about 30 or 35 graduates in Tallahassee with whom I practiced law at one time or another. And I'm proud of every one of them, including you, Kelly, for your accomplishments, both when you were with me and when you and they were out on their own.
Thank you. I enjoyed practicing with you. Did you have mentors that helped you along the way?
I can't say that I had specific mentors and that I started by myself and in my embryonic years as a lawyer, but I had older lawyers here who I looked up to and who helped me. It was a much smaller bar in Tallahassee then, perhaps 150, 160 lawyers, that's practicing lawyers, judges, agency lawyers, and members of the bar who were not practicing law. But at that time, it was a small bar, and a typical local bar association meeting might be 30 or 35 people. Some of the older lawyers who helped me, I looked up to Leroy Collins, for example, with whom I subsequently practiced law for 22 years. My older brother, Dick, who was 12 years older than me and a lawyer and embarking on a political career. As you know, he later served as Attorney General and Justice of the Supreme Court of Florida. They certainly, I can say, Charles Owsley, Bell McKean, Clyde Atkinson, all of the lawyers who were older and more experienced, who all gave me encouragement, and you might say that they inspired me, perhaps even mentored me, but I didn't have a single.
Did you think that their input was very important in your development as a lawyer?
I think so. I learned a great deal from them about relationships with lawyer to lawyer and lawyer to court, lawyer to client. They were largely skilled professionals.
Who are your heroes that have influenced you in your life?
Well, of course, my father, my parents, who instilled in me some things that I still abide by. I guess Harry Truman, more than perhaps anyone else, because I was on Midway Island when the war ended and we were packing and we weren't going to head east to the United States. We were going to be involved in some sort of action more directly and closer to Japan, and he had the courage to bring the war to an end. Incidentally, I think at a great savings of life and using the methods that he used. So he was an inspiration to me. other leaders of our state and our nation. I've been, of course, interested in here in Tallahassee, practicing here. I've had a close view of government, certainly at the state level, and I've seen some good governors and some who were even better governors, but I'm not going to say which I thought was which. I hope I'm being responsive to your question.
You are. What changes have you seen in the legal profession during your career?
I've seen a lot of them. Some of them, most of them I think were good. Some that are not quite so good. But, for example, when I started practicing law in 1947, pleading a law case was under the old common law rules, which was issue pleading. What you're seeking there is to eliminate peripheral matters and get to the real issues, plead it down to that, so you'd have a single, very few issues to try when the trial came up. The change now to code pleading, or rule pleading, is not issue pleading, it's notice pleading. And that means that if you want to know what the issues are, you've got to indulge in a great deal of discovery. If not, you may be blindsided, bushwhacked. And so that is a big, big change I've seen. That is the moving from issue pleading to notice pleading. The criminal rules have changed, for example. Again, going back, and you want to compare when I started and what exists now. There was no public defender's office at that time. We had not had Gideon versus Wainwright, or Argosinger versus Hamlin on the criminal side. And so prior to the creation of the public defender's office, virtually all lawyers who were practicing as a public service and when assigned by the court represented defendants, particularly indigent defendants. That gave a broad knowledge of criminal law among the bar, because virtually everyone was assigned those duties. With the public defender's office being created and the public providing counsel for defendants accused of crimes, there's much less experience generally among lawyers of criminal law matters. That's a change. With the coming of code pleading, we still had a distinction between law cases and equity cases. That was abolished. And so there is no distinction between law and equity in your pleading. I guess a principal reason for change, or certainly a principal reason for change, was the increase in the number of lawyers. At the time that I started practicing law, as I told you, in 1947, there were about 9,000 members of the Florida bar. Today, there's roughly 60,000 members of the Florida bar. As I understand from statistics I've seen recently, of that 60,000 members of the Florida bar, 49,000 have addresses in Florida. I should also, I think, I can say the gender mix. When I started practicing law, women members of the bar represented, I can't be precise, but 1 or 2% of the entire bar, practicing bar. Today, roughly 15,000 members of the bar, roughly a third, roughly a fourth, are women. I've seen changes in the increase of educational requirements there, which you're probably going to ask me some questions I'll get a little further into on that. Another thing is the collegial relationship among lawyers from 1947 to 2000 is vastly different. There was that relationship that was close. The bar was smaller. and you wanted to maintain the respect of your peers, and that drove you in your conduct. Today, there are 2,900 lawyers in Lynn County, compared to the number I gave you a while ago. And I dare say half of them have never represented a client on any matter in the Lynn County Courthouse. They're agency lawyers, they're special interest lawyers, they're lawyers who lobbyists, of course, lawyers who represent even in agencies, specific agencies of that part of our economy that is our society that is regulated by those agencies, then they're specialists in that. I don't say it's bad, but I say it's different.
Okay. You were president of bar in 1965 and 66. What was it like when you were president?
I can give you some examples. At the Board of Governors, which I was privileged to serve as a member of for a number of years, had some 30 members, maybe 35 at most. And the responsibility was more personal then. I can say prior to that, when I served on the Board of Governors before it was enlarged, when there were about 25 members, the responsibility was more personal. Today, I guess there are in excess of 60 members of the Board of Governors. I don't know. But I know it's much larger. And so it's everybody's business. It's nobody's business with a large number. If you have a small number, whatever your assignments are, you take care of them. That's one change. And that's from what it was like when I was president of the bar. We were developing programs, though, and we were concerned with client security fund, continuing legal education, unauthorized practice of law, our relationship with the public, and even legislative programs on matters in which we deemed that lawyers had special skills and were in a knowledge and were in a position to advise the legislature, particularly at committee hearings, as to what the effect would be and perhaps even what position they should take.
Do you have any stories or anecdotes that you remember from your term as president?
There are a lot of fun things there. I do have one that I remember. My predecessor as president of the Florida Bar was Chesterfield Smith, who went on to be president of the American Bar Association. Very, very capable person, very, very good leader, effective leader. A practice of the Board of Governors at that time was at the end of a president's year, sometime within a few months after that, you brought him back, invited him in, treated him like royalty. I say him because there'd been no women presidents up to that point. And they came expecting great things. Well, when we invited Chesterfield in, we did it a little different. We gave him a private reprimand as a part of the practice in our disciplinary program. Of course, we then got to the proper things, but it was really humorous to see Chesterfield's expression change and his wife sitting there and all these good things were going to happen to him, and presentation of the copies of the Bar Journal that were published during his tenure as president, and instead we was told to stand at attention and given a private disciplinary lecture there about his misconduct, which was, of course, not really true, but he took it well, and I think that was a humorous thing.
What changes have you seen with the bar?
Oh, first of all, the changes that come with the increase in the size of the bar. As I've told you, some 60,000 members now with 49,000 of them at Florida addresses. We've had to become more bureaucratic. It's difficult to totally decentralize, I realize that. But I think a centralization, and this is not a criticism, It just takes responsibility away from local levels and moves it to a higher level, an upper level. And so there's been a change in that. For example, I do know some numbers that at the time that I was president, the staff of the Florida Bar, as I recall, full-time staff was 23. I inquired a few days ago as to what the full-time staff is of the Florida Bar. It's 307 staff members, full-time staff members there. So those are changes that I've seen. The real change, though, is the centralization of regulation. We have a wonderful Tallahassee Bar Association now, and it does good things and sponsors things like legal aid and other things, does a lot of fine things. But that bar is mostly a social group rather than a professional group, contrary to what the Tallahassee Bar Association was at the time I became a member. There were social activities, but it was largely a professional group concerned with professional problems.
Have you seen the legal profession get better or worse?
Well, I think some things are better. I think some things are worse. The better things certainly include better legal education. I'm not criticizing the legal education that I received at the University of Florida, but I think lawyers today get better training. And when they leave the law schools and pass the bar admission examination, they're perhaps better qualified to handle legal problems, and they teach lawyers in law school appellate practice. Now, as to trial practice, I think that we got just as much in law school as the students now, and perhaps more in trial practice courses. It's difficult to say what's better and what's worse.
What recommendations would you give to judges or teachers or other lawyers about improving the legal profession, the legal training that we give our young lawyers?
Well, first, I would say, and then you may differ with me, others may differ with me, there are too many lawyers now. And I believe we're training too many lawyers and not keep an eye on the ball and training just qualified lawyers and responding to the public needs. I think that this overpopulation of lawyers breeds litigation that is not necessary. And it, with other rules, has taken away from the judges a responsibility they had. And that is, judges, again going back to those golden years when I first started practicing, judges had a purpose to see that justice was done. And if the lawyers involved were falling a little short of, the judges would endeavor, particularly in criminal cases, to see that justice was done. Now, there's an almost total reliance on the lawyers to present the cases to the judges. Judges are well-trained, know what the law is, know precedent itself, but their involvement in that aspect of the case, in my judgment, is less today than it was at that time. That's one change that I have seen. You asked me, are you asking for advice as to what advice?
Yeah, what would you like to tell new lawyers coming into the profession? What kind of advice would you like to give
I'd
them?
like them to keep their eyes on the ball, to adhere to the goals and the duties of the legal profession. That is, to concern themselves with serving their clients in a direct, straightforward manner, trying to maintain not only justice for the client, but to keep the cost to the client to a reasonable minimum. Lawyering is a great privilege. It puts one in a position not only to affect the lives and the well-being of those they represent, but lawyers, by their training, experience, and their skills, can better serve as public leaders than the average layman. And so I think that lawyers should keep their eye on that ball of their duty of public service, which I fear that is being lost to some degree, and I'm aware of it when I note the change in the percentage of lawyers in our legislative bodies, the House and the Senate. I can't give you the exact numbers, but the percentage is substantially lower now than it was 50, 40, even 30 or 10 years ago. So I think lawyers should be very much aware of the privilege they have and discharge their duties not only to their clients but to the public as a whole.
What do you think the legal profession is doing right, and what do you think it's doing wrong?
I think I've about touched on that. And piecemeal, I think the legal profession is doing right in an effort, for example, through our continuing legal education programs, to see that lawyers are trained and skilled and know what they're doing and are able to represent to their clients what the law is and advise them. What I think we're doing wrong is we are sponsoring a system that protracts and draws out litigation rather than getting to the point. I think also, as I said a moment ago, that lawyers are losing sight, overall now, not everyone, of their duty to the public.
How would you define ethics in the legal profession?
Well, ethics to me, we're speaking of a code of ethics, is simply a minimum standard of lawyer conduct.
What about professionalism? Does that differ from ethics?
Well, professionalism embraces or includes a lot of ethics, but it goes beyond those minimum standards and deals with lawyers' relationship with lawyers. Professionalism, I'm talking about. Lawyers' relationship with the court, lawyers' relationship to clients, lawyers' relationship to the public, and those relationships should be, to a large degree, in a professional manner, and the minimum standards of ethics do not reach the level of professionalism, in my judgment, Kelly.
What are your core beliefs that have helped you through your life?
I would say the training that my parents gave me, and it can be summarized as a golden rule: do unto others as you would that they do unto you.
What about your philosophy of life in general?
Well, that goes back to service. I think that every lawyer owes a duty to the public because of the privileges that the lawyer has. And that may not be totally my philosophy of life, but it's my philosophy as a lawyer as to what lawyers should be doing. And of course I can talk about honor and integrity and leadership and all those things, but they all fall into it, Kelly. The lawyer has a great responsibility, and they should discharge it. And I'm disappointed when I see lawyers not discharging that responsibility, particularly in public service.
If you had a magic wand and you could change anything in the profession, what would you change and why?
Well, I've never had a magic wand, let me say, and I'm not sure what a magic wand would do. But if I could change the profession, I would endeavor to reduce the number of lawyers. I don't mean getting rid of the ones you have, although we have some that we should get rid of, but to raise the standards of legal education and admission and broaden it. And those standards should be high enough where the number of lawyers should be reduced to reasonable to serve the public needs. Now, if you want to tell me, want me to tell you whether I think the 60,000 now would be better if it's 30,000 and such, I'll not give you specific numbers, but I know there are too many lawyers, and I know that breeds litigation, and I think the concentration should be on qualifications rather than number. I know that brings me to the subject of law schools. They're talking about new law schools. If anything, we ought to get rid of a law school or two. We don't need any more law schools in Florida.
I think there's some members of the public that would agree with you on that. Is there any message you would like to leave with the people that may be watching this?
Well, it's still the same thing. Keep your eye on the ball. Remember what a lawyer's duties and responsibilities are, as well as a lawyer's privileges. Try to be highly professional. Try to live high and conduct yourself higher than those minimum standards of the code of ethics. Just be a good person. Don't take on a responsibility unless you can discharge it, and discharge it in a professional, good manner. I would say one thing is, I think lawyers my advice to judges is to be sure that the lawyers practicing before them are diligent. My advice to the lawyers ought to be diligent and try to move your cases along and solve problems your clients have.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, Bob. We appreciate it.
But I've enjoyed it very much. I don't know whether I've contributed anything to what you want, but I've shared with you my thoughts, and I'm honored and privileged that you would even ask me to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.